Okay, welcome. Good evening. Hello. Okay, okay, 1 minute. Welcome. My name is Ola. Thank you for joining today. And today we are talking about communications. We're talking about foundations of effective communication, particularly within the context of the Canadian workplace. So I'm just going to go ahead now to share my slides and we will begin. First, let's watch this video.
I currently serve as the Director of Community Impact at Waterloo Region Community Foundation.
I'm a City Councillor, Ward 5, Kitchener.
I help people tell their story.
Tilei is a pioneering Black female-owned secular ag tech company.
Presently, I'm an actor and a professor.
I'm Program Manager of Lift Off by CCWL.
One of the founders and the current president of Nigerians in the region of Waterloo.
The very first job I got when I landed here, I lasted just 1 day.
Nothing had prepared me for the winter and what I was about to experience.
I needed to learn how to teach Canadian adults. So I did that at Humber College for a couple of months.
It took a lot of education and convincing and proving to the authorities before we could begin to get traction.
Success leaves clues. If you go into a new industry, look for like the most successful people in that industry, reach out to them. You'll be shocked how many doors will open.
Every day is a learning curve.
Give yourself grace. You have to tough it out. You have to be resilient.
Find your community.
I've lost 2 jobs since I've been in Canada.
Everybody's path is different.
Right.
I currently serve as the Director of Community
The study instruction. I said, move to the next slide. Yes. Thank you. Right. We usually like to start with that video because that's the trailer of one of our initiatives. It's called Rising Strong, and that's the season 1 trailer. We feel like there's so many messages embedded in that trailer from our amazing guests, and we'd like to start our webinars from that standpoint. So much information, so much inspiration for us to take from and to put us in a good state of mind for the webinar. My name is Ola, and like I said, we're talking about effective communication. So today we're talking about foundations of effective communication, particularly within the context of the Canadian workplace and as people of Black African descent, skilled newcomers or skilled immigrants of Black African descent. So let us dive in. Just a little bit about myself. I don't want to take it for granted that this is not your first time here. My full name is Olabukola, but feel free to call me Ola. I'm the founder of The Successful Newcomer. I have over 16 years of experience across various industries. A good friend of mine has actually told me to stop saying over 16 years of experience, that I should say over almost 2 decades of experience. That sounds a bit more. Okay, so I moved to Canada in June 2020 as a skilled worker and became a Canadian citizen in January 2024. I'm a nonprofit consultant, founder, learning experience designer, and part-time college professor. That's just a little bit of who I am. I'm also a wife and I'm a mom. Okay, let's move on. I don't want to take too much of your time. So today we're talking about communication. We'll talk about exploring the communication loop. We'll talk about the presence of noise and what noise really means within the context of the Canadian workplace. And we'll talk about the importance of contexts. We'll explore noise a bit more within a multicultural context. We'll talk about verbal and non-verbal communication. We'll talk about communication channels. We will talk about communication styles, why effective communication is important, and then we will talk about building your communication muscles. So let's dive in. Okay, so what I'm going to share next is an image of that represent what communication is. So this is an image that represents what communication is, and I want you to take a good look at the image. In addition to that, we'll talk about what the text on the slide right now. It says here that communication is a two-way process of reaching mutual understanding in which participants not only exchange information, news, ideas, and feelings, but also create and share meaning. Now, if you go on the internet, you will find so many different definitions of communication, right? But I really like this one because it talks about, and it's a combination of different definitions of communication. So, but what I really like about it is that it talks about the fact that it's a two-way process. It's not a one-way process. It's a two-way process, right? It's not one person just, if I could get a penny for $1, for every time I have asked someone, oh, so when you said that or when you did that, what did the person say? And the person tells me, oh, it's not my business. I just said my beat and I went on. Or when I ask people, when you send that email, when you send that email, what did the person say? And they go, oh, I don't care. I don't care if they respond or not. I just, did my bit and I moved on. I find it very funny, because that means we're not taking charge of communication. I'm hoping that by the end of this webinar today, you would know how to take better charge of communication, of your own communication, particularly as someone who is skilled within the Canadian workplace and who is trying to build a fulfilling career. Remember, we're not just here to exist. We're not just here to survive. We are actually here to thrive. And that's why we're putting all of these things together so that you can get all of the information and the skills that you need to thrive within the Canadian workplace. It's not just about, paying your bills and doing those jobs. You really do have to thrive within a Canadian workplace. Okay, so it also talks about creating and sharing meaning. And, I said to you that you should take a look at the image. So if you look at this image now, it shows that the communication goes from the sender to the receiver. And the sender encodes the information that they want to share, meaning they package it and process it in a way that they think would be understandable for the receiver. That's the encoding process, right? And the message goes through a channel, which is demonstrated by this arrow, right? And then it reaches the receiver, who then decodes the information. While all of those things are going on, while the encoding is going on, while the message is going through the channel, while it's trying to get to the receiver, something is happening. There's always something present, and that something is called noise. There's always noise present. And I know you might be thinking what I mean by noise is, hitting something or someone saying, ha, who, that's not really, it could actually be one of the things that would constitute noise in this context. But what I mean in this context is different. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. But one thing I want you to know is that, there's the process of the sender encoding, meaning packaging the information in a way that they think will be understandable for the receiver. And then it goes through a channel. And then when it goes through that channel, it gets to the receiver, and then the receiver decodes. Again, there's noise present. Even that channel is a factor in how the message will be received. That process of encoding, it covers things like your language, the language you would use to send, deciding on the channel you will use to send, how you will share the message, the format of the message. All of those things are present. And look at these purple arrows. These are like the feedback loops. So when a message gets to the decoder, the receiver, who also is a decoder, the receiver then provides feedback to the sender to confirm if they have, to confirm what they understand by that message. And this can, because we talk about, careers and things like that, over the past few weeks, we'll be talking about interviewing. This can also affect your delivery at interviews. Understanding this concept can affect your delivery at interviews. So sometimes we think when we talk about delivering the receiver providing feedback about the message, we tend to think, oh, it means the feedback will say, the receiver will say, oh, I understand you. Sometimes that's how it comes. It could be, I understand you. It could be, but trust me, sometimes that's not how it comes. Sometimes it presents as a change in behavior, right? Sometimes that feedback presents as a change in behavior. Sometimes the feedback presents as a smile. Sometimes the feedback presents as resistance, which is why you have to be paying attention You really have to be paying attention. And it's not just about words. That's one thing I want you to take from here. And it's not just the receiver who can provide feedback to the sender. Even the sender can provide feedback to the receiver. The goal is to ensure that value and meaning are shared, or value or meaning is shared. That's the goal. So when you want to communicate, when you want to share any form of information, you're not just talking. For example, I'm here today. I'm not just talking for the sake of talking, right? I'm talking because I want to pass on knowledge. And I'm not just talking because I want to pass on knowledge. I'm talking because I want that knowledge to create meaning for you, and to impact the way you would behave, the way you would carry yourself in your Canadian workplace, right? So if I'm done with all of this webinar, we're done with all of the talking, and even if you tell me, oh, I really understand what you have said, but I still see you committing some blunders, that means communication has not taken place. That means I haven't adequately communicated, or I could have tried my best, and maybe there was just noise present, and the noise created some sort of interference and led to you not understanding my message. So different factors can be present. So what I want you to take from here is that communication is not as straightforward as we think it is. It's actually very powerful, and it can impact behavior. It's about sharing meaning and also impacting behavior. So one thing that we're going to take one step further now. And I always talk about this step because it's extremely important, particularly for us as people who didn't grow up here. So we create our content for people who came here to Canada as skilled newcomers, as skilled people, sorry. And if you came here as an adult, as a skilled person, that means you already went through a process. You already got used to a particular context, cultural, environmental context from your background. And now you're here, it's a different scenario. And if you're not careful, you will continue to get in your own way with the way you're communicating. So one very key thing I would like you to note from here is context. Context in its simplest form. There's so many other definitions that you can get for context, but context in the simplest form, and for the purpose of this webinar, means the situation, the condition within which communication is happening. And there are so many different factors to context. It could be, I think for us, the most important one will be culture. The culture here, and because we are adults and we didn't grow up here, it's understandable that it might be a bit difficult to then adapt to the new culture. And one thing you have to understand is that communication cannot happen in isolation of context. Every form of communication happens within a specific context. So cultural contexts, even within the workplace, with your neighbors at home, with your, if you happen to be a parent, with your children's school or schools, different situations, right? And you are a major player within that context. And you are responsible for encoding whatever information you want to share to create meaning and to choose the channel through which you will deliver the message to ensure that you're delivering and you're sharing the message in a way that the receiver would understand. And you have to remain mindful of the noises that are present. So knowing that, let's move on to the next slide and talk about the concept of noise. So what really is noise? What really does noise mean? Noise is anything that can hamper or distort the meaning you're trying to create with your message. Anything that can hamper or distort the meaning you're trying to create with your message. Imagine, like, as I'm talking right now, there's like lots of noise in my background. There's banging, or there's music, or there are blasts. That's noise. And that's literal, right? That's what noise literally means. But another form of noise can be your phone. the distraction, thoughts, a person's mental state, a person's desires, worries, biases, what your thoughts, stereotypes. There could be so many things that could constitute noise within the context of communication. And we'll talk about noise in a multicultural context. Now, what does noise really mean in a multicultural context? Remembering that Canada is a diverse country, and we came here as adults, so we are players within a diverse space. And also remembering that in a number of Canadian workplaces, you would experience people from diverse cultures, diverse orientations, and different identities, right? Remembering that. So what does noise mean in a multicultural context? It could be language barriers. Again, I would like to clarify that. Language barrier, when I say language barrier, I don't mean that you don't understand English or French, which those two official languages of Canada. It doesn't mean that you don't understand it. For many of us, we have been speaking English since we were kids. That's maybe the lingua franca of our home country. I get that. But one thing, if you go back, and if I don't want to spend too much time on this because we did a live session on that. So if you could go check our Instagram page at The Successful Newcomer, watch the live video on phrases you may have been misunderstanding. You might be speaking the same language, but be speaking it in a different way. You might be using words in a different way. A common one that's popular in, I think, a lot of communities is the word mad. The use of the word mad, where for many of us, for me particularly, in my home country, mad means, like a complete mental breakdown, like it's a psychotic situation where there's confusion, loss of orientation, and things like that. But here, most cases, all the times I have heard mad, I think in most cases, it means angry. So when somebody says, "Are you mad?" they don't mean that they're not asking if you are having a psychotic episode. They're trying to ask if you're angry. So you can imagine, not understanding that. And you both you're talking to somebody or you're talking to colleagues, and you all are speaking English. But the way you're using English can actually constitute a barrier, and that's noise. It's noise in different dimensions that I'll talk about too. Number one, in terms of even understanding. Number two, that confusion. So imagine you make a first statement. It leads to some sort of confusion, and you're making subsequent statements. The confusion of the first statement can stop them from understanding your subsequent statements. That's something we need to understand. So the more we understand, it doesn't mean that we're going to be able to communicate, clearly and effectively and excellently right away. Maybe not, but it's going to start your journey of becoming an effective communicator. That's what we're trying to see. So the next thing is cultural assumptions. And everybody is guilty of this. I don't think there's anybody who, even if they're not guilty right now, who is not making, I think that's the human default setting. Just that you now have to make the effort to say, I don't want to do that. That's not the right thing to do. So when you meet people up from different cultures, what's going on in your mind? What assumptions are you having that could be interfering with the way you would interpret their communication? Or think about how, and that's not to say that you would preempt people or you would be unfair or you would judge people, but it's just good for you to be mindful of the fact that it's possible, it is possible for your message to be misinterpreted due to cultural assumptions. So you have to take that responsibility, particularly within the Canadian workplace, because you have to take your growth. You have to own your growth. Your growth is your responsibility. Nobody's going to come and say, "Oh, I want to make sure Allah grows. I want to make sure." The chances are that it can happen, but in most cases, it doesn't happen like that. Canada is this word, I find that word very funny, egalitarian society, where self-advocacy is prioritized. So you're expected to take charge of your own learning and your own growth. some of the things that can impact your growth positively or negatively would be your communication skills. And if you're not aware of, some potential cultural assumptions, you might be thinking you're communicating, sending a message across, but your message is being interpreted in a different way. And you're not passing on the message that you really wish to pass on. The challenge with that is that you're shortchanging yourself. And the saddest thing about that is that in most cases, you don't know, because Canada is a polite society. So it's unlikely that somebody would actually approach you and say, oh, and be really clear and say, no, what you're saying is wrong, or we're not getting your message, or they might actually be trying to be nice to you and not saying anything, but you're remaining on that entry level role and you're wondering why you're not growing. So it's very important that you do your research, you find out what the cultural assumptions might be, and you also question your own cultural assumption, because you might not be receiving. So we're talking about two dimensions now, you as a sender and you as a receiver. Because if your manager is giving you feedback and you're not understanding that feedback because of your cultural assumptions, that's a problem. So you have to be mindful of what the cultural assumptions might be, so that you can proactively manage them. You can proactively provide clarification. You can proactively choose the channel of communication so that you don't expose yourself to, challenges that are avoidable. The last one would be nonverbal signals and misinterpretation. So this is a huge one, honestly. I'll use an example. I, as a person, I'm usually, when I'm listening to someone, one of my most comfortable positions is to fold my arms like this, and it means I'm actually listening to you. Like I really want to just listen, but usually within a Canadian context, and I think most Western countries, folding your arms like this when someone is talking to you is interpreted as closing off. You're listening, but you're closing off the person. Like you don't want to let them in. That's not the case for me. I know a number of people also from my cultural background that they do that, and that's not the case for them. It's not even an unconscious thing. Remember also that as immigrants of Black African descent, for the longest time, and I'm okay with being challenged with this, you can send me a message later, let me know, whatever you want to do. For the longest time, we have not been a significant sample, significant population for many research samples. So when research is done and there are findings, and there's a lot of communication, talk about this even within the medical field. For example, if you go on the internet and you search, what does a rash look like? Well, they would say it's reddish. For some of us, it can be reddish, the people who are really fair-skinned. But for some of us who are darker skinned, even for me, sometimes it's a bit reddish. But for people who are really dark-skinned, it's not ever reddish, And that's to show that for the longest time, our population has not really featured significantly in samples, in research samples. So when research comes out and they're saying, oh, across the world, no, maybe not. Did you really talk to us? Did you, so that's something for us to know when we're reading, these pieces of research. There's so many, and the truth is, I think it's on subsequent slides, only 7% of your communication is verbal. And before we came to Canada, or maybe if you were local, I used to teach communication even back home in my home country, Nigeria. And would say, oh, it's just 7%. So you need to really be paying attention to your nonverbal cues, how you're showing up and things like that. But as skilled professionals within the Canadian context, even that 7% verbal, you have to pay a lot of attention to it, because again, it might not be received in the way that you expect it to be received due to language barriers and cultural assumptions. So back to nonverbal signals. So you have to really know what things mean within the Canadian context. So I teach also part-time at the college, and typically I just do a thumbs up if somebody is doing well. But I always have to ask, does this mean yes, you're doing well in everybody's cultural context? If everybody says yes, I'm okay, I'll continue to do that. But if there's anybody who says no, I don't ever do that. So no assumptions. No assumptions. What if it means something else in somebody's context? What if the peace sign, you're saying peace, is it like this peace? And it means something different. What if I know in some contexts, if you sit in a particular way, like you're sitting like this, it means you're a big person, Maybe you're a big person, an accomplished person. But within the Canadian context, there's so many things wrong with that. You're slouching, it's called slouching. It means maybe you're not paying attention to the work, or you're bringing in a lot of pride. So many things can be wrong with that. So you have to realize that non-verbal signals can be a form of noise, within the Canadian context, and it can be misinterpreted. So one thing I do typically is to also offer some sort of explanation or offer information about my cultural context if I find myself in places where maybe I've done that already. So one day, like last year, I was at a workshop. I was really enjoying the workshop. I just caught myself after like an hour that I had been sitting like this. So after the workshop, I just walked up to the facilitator to say, oh, that was an amazing session. That I realized that I was folding my arms, that, in my cultural context doesn't really mean anything, but that I really enjoyed it. They shouldn't take it like I was closing them off. That I really enjoyed. I said, oh, yeah, oh, thank you so much for coming over. I really appreciate that, and things like that. Another thing that is very popular is eye contact. So we have a second season of the Rising Strong video series. And one of our guests actually said to us that a policeman accused them of, of lying, I think, because they were not maintaining eye contact. And I hear this a lot from so many of us, maybe not a policeman, maybe a boss, maybe a friend, and even when you're reading text online, you're doing research online, they're saying, oh, watch out for, if you're watching all those crime shows, any of those things, they're saying, watch out for eye contact. If the person is not maintaining eye contact, then they're probably lying. Maybe not. If you look at our cultural context, it doesn't mean that we're lying. It's a form of reverence, right? We're trying to be respectful. We're trying to ensure that, it doesn't look like I'm looking you in the eye. But these are adjustments we have to make, because the challenge is if you're not maintaining that eye contact, your integrity is being questioned, right? And that's going to negatively impact the way the rest of your message will be received. So very important for us to be mindful of these things, how language barrier can play out. And like I said, it's not about your English language or French language capacity. It's about how you use the words, how you use the phrases. There's some phrases in my language. I'm from the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. Nigeria is a very diverse country. I'm from the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. And if I interpret some Yoruba proverbs to you, I would be speaking English, but there's no way you would understand it. So maybe you might understand this one. If I say 20 children cannot play for 20 years. Please do not unmute yourself because we're streaming live on YouTube. Please do not turn on your video because we're also streaming live on YouTube. But if you want, you can type in the chat box. Let me know what you think 20 children cannot play for 20 years means. Or I'm trying to think of another. There's so many proverbs, and I'm sure that even in your own language, if you were to interpret some proverbs or even idioms directly to English language, the meaning will be completely distorted. So that's why I'm saying that we have to be mindful. We take it for granted. For many of us who speak English, we take it for granted that, oh, I speak English, so I'm good. No. You still have to be mindful of the way your communication is being received and the way you are delivering it. Another challenge another non-verbal challenge is your tone of voice. It can be misinterpreted. Sometimes it can be misinterpreted as it's too strong. You're coming on too strong. And I'm not saying all of these things for you to think that I'm expecting that you should be assimilated. No. I would say kick against assimilation. Please do not dim your light for anyone. But it's a form of empathy when you make an effort to ensure that your message is received in the way you intend for it to be received. If you're upset and you want to express that you're upset, you feel like doing it in the way that you do it in your culture, and that's your intention, I'm okay with that. But what breaks my heart is if it's not your intention for your message to be received in a particular way, and that's how it's constantly being received, then there's a problem. We need to work on it, and we need to make the effort as the owner of the message to deliver it in a way that it can be truly understood, and the meaning you're sharing is the meaning you intended from the beginning to share. And if you're the receiver also, the meaning you are receiving is the meaning that, you know, was intended by the sender, and is the meaning that can actually help your career. One example I always give is feedback from colleagues or managers. If you're not receiving feedback in the way you should receive it, you're not understanding it. That's why a lot of people lose their jobs. At the end of the probation period, they're asked to go because everybody thinks they're difficult to work with. They don't understand anything. They're not listening to anything. They're not. If they think you're not understanding, that's even wonderful, because they might make the effort to help. But if they think that, oh, you speak great English, so you are understanding it, but you're just choosing not to listen, then that's a problem. So very important for us to be mindful of these things as we go along. So moving on, talking about verbal and non-verbal communication. I've said before that there's a very old piece of research that says that only 7% of your communication is verbal. And I think that research was done in 1955, a long time ago. And since then, so many other pieces of research have confirmed that. In fact, some have even reduced the percentage further to say it's a very little, percentage of your communication that's verbal. And when we say verbal communication, we mean the words you're using, so the oral communication. Sometimes it can actually also be written communication, because it's the words in there. And I hope you know that there's also a non-verbal element of written communication. There's sign language also when we talk about verbal communication. So it's about the words that you're using, the words that are coming out of your mouth, or the words that you're writing with your pen or typing in your email, or the sign language. When we talk about non-verbal communication, your tone of voice, your body language. So imagine that all the while I've been doing the webinar, I've just been going, and it's just been, and if you notice, my tone has been going up, down, I've been modulated. I think it's called modulation. So imagine that it's just been a flat tone. The funny thing is we tend to take nonverbal communication for granted until it goes down, until it goes south. Then you're thinking, what's wrong? What's missing here? Maybe if you remember any of the teachers you really loved growing up, or any of the professors you really loved growing up, or even right now if you've been to school here, the ones you really loved. You loved them, but you probably didn't know that one of the reasons you loved their delivery was because they owned their nonverbal expression a lot. But think also about the ones that you didn't particularly enjoy their classes, and compare the nonverbal, their communication. You would see that maybe there's the one you really liked, is that one who would, use your voice, use their hands, use their bodies, their facial expression comes to life, they're maintaining eye contact, they're using the gestures in the right way, they have the right posture. There's just something about it. There's just something about how you use so many, and all of these things are happening at the same time. If you're not careful, you would not even know. Which is why I am an advocate of recording yourself. I know it sounds weird. I know you're thinking you would look silly, but I am, particularly for us who are skilled immigrants to Canada, skilled professionals in the Canadian system, you really have to stand on the other side and observe yourself like a stranger. How are you going to know how you're showing up if you don't record yourself and watch yourself, right? You might be exaggerating your hand gestures, and you wouldn't know. I've had calls to record myself and I noticed I was moving my head too much and I just kept going. Imagine if I was talking, I was just going, and I'm doing this. You would be dizzy. So I'm saying for you to even record your voice, check out your tone. That helps you to see how you're sounding. And I cannot stress it enough that you really want to be showing up in a way that causes you to be considered or to be seen as worthy of the positions you're pursuing, in a way that doesn't automatically position you as somebody to be pitied, right? In a way that when people see you and talk to you and engage with you, they have a management position open and they're saying, oh, would you like to be interviewed for that position? So think about, what are those things that I need to do to show up in that manner? Your tone of voice is one of those things. You can't be sounding flat. There's no animation in your voice, and you're expecting people to connect with you. The challenge with not communicating effectively also is that it disconnects you from people. There's a disconnection. So people don't feel you when you're talking to them. They don't feel your power. They don't feel your energy. And I hope you have heard this phrase that more decisions are made in the ballroom than in the boardroom. I hope you have heard that. So knowing that phrase now, it's not really, so even though we're talking about the Canadian workplaces, we also know that over 85% of the job positions that are available, that are open in Canada, are not posted. So no matter how many job postings you're seeing right now, you're only seeing 15% or at the maximum 20% of the available opportunities. If you're not communicating effectively with people you come across, how then are they going to be able to mention to you that, oh, there's this opening in my organization, would you like to interview for it? So we have to be mindful of our facial expressions. I would like to particularly talk about facial expression because depending on your cultural context, where you're from, and this is the work that you have to do by yourself, you have to do some personal reflection. Some of us are from contexts where we're like an open book. If you're irritated by someone, you're going, you have to be careful. We're humans. There are people who will not really gel with, right? You wouldn't really go and get along with that person. You won't feel their energy. But again, we are a nice society. So you don't go, and if you're not careful, if you don't do your own reflection, if you're not mindful, these things will rear up their ugly heads at the most unexpected times, where you're squeezing your face or doing all sorts of things, and you won't know. I've seen cases where, have you been on social media where it's somebody's birthday party or an event or a wedding, and there's just someone frowning, looking angry, because there's something that's happening internally that's showing on their face. So we really have to be mindful. If there's anything you need to resolve internally, you need to do that work of doing that reflection, examining yourself, thinking of how you feel. I think we have a webinar on interviewing, and we talk a bit on confidence in that webinar. I think we talk a lot about confidence in different things that we do. So that's something you really want to be working on, because these things can then show in the way you show up. The funny thing about nonverbal communication is it's often impacted by things that things that are unconscious or subconscious. So it's impacted by the subconscious. So if you're not careful, you won't even know what's making you show up in the way you're showing up. And we really cannot afford to be in that situation, because many of us are here with lots of skills. And if you're not careful, you will only continue to occupy that, or continue to only be able to have that entry-level role. So we really have to resolve those. Even your posture, the way your posture is, it can communicate whether or not you're confident. So you really have to be mindful of the way you keep your shoulders. Something as simple as that. But if you don't stand in front of your mirror, and I know that it's painful, it's tough to sit in front of your mirror. I have done it. I do it a lot. Initially, it was I used to feel so silly, but I got used to it, and it's been very helpful. So imagine you probably don't even know that your shoulders are usually slumped. You don't know. But if you stand in front of your mirror and you're talking, or you put a tripod, or you ask somebody to do a recording of you and you're talking, you'll be able to evaluate yourself like you're going to step out of yourself and evaluate yourself and think, oh, okay, what's my body language saying? Am I maintaining eye contact? What's my shoulders saying? What's my posture like? You know, and it's difficult for other people to tell you these things, except you ask. So one thing you can also do is to ask people. You can send, when you make a video of yourself, you can send your video to trusted people. One thing I always do, one thing I would definitely do at the end of this webinar, guess what? I will ask my husband, how was it? Is there anything you think I need to improve? And he already knows that he needs to tell me the truth, because this is my life's work. So I need to be showing up in the way that I want to show up. Because if I'm showing up in a way that I do not intend to show up, I'm doing myself a great disservice, and the people I'm trying to serve to, I'm doing them a great disservice. So let's be mindful of our body language. Let's be mindful of our tone of voice, you know, our facial expressions. One key thing that always helps, that I always tell people, it just always helps, it almost does, is smiling. Smiling opens, and it doesn't matter that the other people are not smiling. So I used to work in one of the toughest industries back home in Nigeria, the financial services industries, where and I was quite young then, so I had like managers, bosses, all of those people who were like 20 years older. So, and culturally also, you have to respect someone who is older than you are. So apart from the fact that they were maybe directors or all of those positions, I also had to respect them because they were older. Some of them they always had frowns on their faces. You know, maybe they felt like that was the way to show leadership or to show power. They would always be frowning. They would, when you go for meetings, you know, we're talking about budgets and meeting targets. They're saying, what's funny about it? Why do you think I don't allow, one thing I would not allow anybody to do to me is to take away my smile. You will not take away my smile, no matter who you are. I have made up my mind. My smile is there and I will constantly use it. I've been in many situations where I get into a meeting, everybody's frowning. They're trying to be hard. I'm maintaining my smile. Before they know it, they're already smiling too. Right? So one thing I would say, one joker you can always use is to smile. Is it going to come to you easily? No. You have to practice your smile. That's it. So moving on. So again, one key takeaway is to know that only 7% of our message is conveyed by the words we use. Every other thing would be your body language, your tone of voice, and all of those things that constitute non-verbal communication. And again, like I said, some of these things can, you know, many of these non-verbal communication elements are impacted by the subconscious, that if you're not being intentional about, you know, reviewing them, doing your personal reflection, you know, thinking of your experiences, trying to find out, seeking feedback, you would never find out. And you just might be showing up in a way that's negatively impacting your career or your business. So moving on, we're going to talk about communication channels. So one channel is face-to-face communication, where, you know, we're talking about in-person communication or video communication. This counts for face-to-face. Since COVID, we began to count it as face-to-face because that was the best we could get during COVID, right? So this counts for face-to-face. Another channel is voice, and that will be telephone calls or voice notes, you know, where your face is not showing your voice, but your voice is featuring in the communication. So you're delivering that message with your voice primarily. So that's one channel that people who work in the contact centers usually use. If you're a business person and people are constantly calling you, or you are getting telephone interviews, this is voice. So you're communicating through your voice, telephone calls, and that's where you really have to be mindful, because again, you don't have your your face to make up for whatever you're saying. It's just your voice. And then there's written communication, which can happen through email, through WhatsApp, through text messages, letters, general announcements, spreadsheets in form of reports, all those pivot tables, and all of those things. One thing I would like to say here, one thing I would like to say here is, as professionals within the Canadian workplace, I can't even count the number of people who have told me that they're having a really hard time at work with maybe difficult bosses or difficult colleagues. So I mentioned to you that I used to teach communication back home. The way I taught this was different than from the way I'm teaching it now. Because there's some things that would say, oh, some types of messages are sensitive. It's better for you to deliver them face to face. But guess what is happening to you if you continue? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't prioritize face to face communication, where maybe it's a high context type of information or something that's sensitive or something that can be easily misunderstood. You really want to convey some sort of emotion. You might want to use face to face, but take this. So my people would say, put this in your left hand, and don't eat with it. We eat with our right hand. So the meaning is, this is very important information that you have to keep and don't forget. Written information is supreme, particularly in the workplace. Sometimes the reason someone has even started to bully you at all is because they have noticed that you never document their communication with you. There's no trail. So if you ever go to human resources to say, oh, this manager is bullying me, there's nothing to show. It's your word against theirs. And there are many people who can have multiple identities. This minute they are like a monster. The next minute they are crying like babies. Oh I'm so sorry. So you really have to be careful. So some people have asked me, and I know for some of us, the context that we're from, for example, if you're asking for time off, in my previous experience, if you want to ask for time off and you send your boss an email, you must be joking. That means you don't need that time off. They won't even see it. Are they even going to see it? They won't see it. They won't read it. You must be joking. Yeah, you want to go take time off and you're asking your boss via email. Then you're doing yourself a great disservice in my former context. But here, again, remember how I said it's an egalitarian society. There's an expectation for you to advocate for yourself. So nobody's going to frown at it if you don't walk over to say, oh, I would like to ask. Most of the time they would expect, back home, they would say, talk to your manager first before you go enter your vacation request on the system or before you send an email. The challenge is with doing that here in the system is you may be coming across as someone who is, playing office politics in a shoddy way, who is trying to patronize the manager, right? And if something goes wrong, if something goes wrong with that loop, there's no way for you to show that you have actually, sent in your request. Another example is if your manager has given you feedback about something that you usually do, and you're struggling to understand it, one way to get, because sometimes it's not even you. Many times there's nothing wrong with you. But because you're not documenting the communication, it's easy for both of you to continue to misunderstand. So what I usually tell people is, even if it was a face-to-face conversation, write an email and say, oh, thank you so much. And it depends on the way you do the email. This is one of the things we're going to teach at the workshop on Saturday. Depends on the way you do the email. Thank you very much. This is what I think, these are my takeaways from our conversation. Feel free to let me know if, I've gotten anything wrong or if there's anything else you'd like me to clarify or confirm. You have that on record. Once somebody knows that you document your communication with them. So see, even with your children's school, if there's anybody here who has kids, even with I know it takes time to send those emails, but even with your children's schools, they have called you, they have said, oh, this thing happened to, let's say, Alex. Alex had a fall. He was playing with one of his friends and there was a misunderstanding and he had a fall and they're all okay now, but we just wanted to let you know. Oh, thank you so much for letting me know. Drop the call. Get on your laptop, on your phone. Type an email. Thank you so much for the call. I really appreciate you taking the time to call me. I just wanted to say that we're grateful that you let us know and just based on what you said that Alex had a fall and there was a child involved in that situation, we understand whatever you want to say. So usually I would not even ask them to punish the child. Say, oh, we understand that the children play. We get that. We just wanted to say that it might be helpful for them to get this sort of information, whatever I want to share. I might not even say anything about what I think they need to do. But what I'm trying to do is to document that situation, that happening. At the end of the day, if my child happens to be on the other side where he mistakenly hits someone or maybe someone falls, something happens and it was like his fault, and they're trying to make like a super big deal out of it, they would know that there's something on record where I have extended grace to another child on record. I don't have to be shouting and be saying, oh, the other time, 2 weeks ago, I extended grace. I did this. Now it's my turn. You're not doing. No, I don't need to. Everybody knows that there's something on record where I extended grace. So tell me how my own child is not deserving of grace. So even at work, you get a message, something happened. Oh, I really do understand. I just wanted to check back with you to be sure that I got all of the things that you said. This is what I understood by what you said. Please feel free to let me know if I've gotten anything wrong or if there's any clarification you'd like to make. It's on record. That person would know not to mess with you because everything is written. And they know that if they continue to act up like that, you have your records. So you would see that they will suddenly begin to adjust their behavior. So that's something we need to understand, even as if you notice that there's a manager who is always just throwing you under the bus, begin to document your communication. Very important. Preferably, I would say, when you join an organization, be like that. So that everybody knows that you're not to be messed with. When you do something, even if you start a new job and you're doing some nice things, you're achieving some great results, make it a note to send your manager an email periodically to say, oh, I just wanted to share this success with you. I did this week and it was wonderful. Thank you. You even massage and say, thank you for supporting me and thank you for sharing your. Let's see how they will go and say it at management level or in a meeting or when it's time for promotion. Let's see how they're going to say that you don't deserve it. And then you bring out all your records and say, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. Tell me, in your record, you have said these are the things we need to do to get the promotion. So what's making me not eligible for that promotion? Again, Canada is an egalitarian society and self-advocacy is expected. I hope we get that. So in choosing our channel of communication, there are many things you want to confirm. Do you need an audit trail? So all of the explanations that I've just given now, they're about having an audit trail. There are some types of communication, some types of messages you certainly don't want to send via. So for example, I usually tell people, anything that's on the extreme, you really don't want to share it on the phone. So maybe you just got a new job and you're calling a friend. Even if you're going to share it on the phone, always make sure that you're asking, are you driving? Where are you? Are you sitting? Are you okay? Because we tend to think it's only bad news that we can share, like off the bat on the phone. Even good news can harm someone. If someone is driving, I've heard of someone who said they were driving, they were on the highway, they got a message, I think it was a call, about something that they had been waiting for a very long time, that they had been approved. They had to park because they became disoriented. It was good news, but it can disorient you. Disorient it, whatever. You understand what I'm trying to say, right? So very important in choosing your channel of communication. Think about, does it need an audit trail? Is it a very emotional message? Is it something that, apart from an audit trail, is it even something that can be misunderstood? Is it something that you need to have clarity on? Is this so for example, if you're trying to teach a new staff, like a colleague, how to turn off the office light, it might not need an email because it's just go there and turn it off. But maybe you're trying to teach them how to use Workday. You likely need an email because they would need to go back to that email regularly to check through and see, this is what you said, this is what you said, and the steps, they will need to go through the steps. So think about the purpose of the communication, purpose of the message, what you're trying to achieve with the message, you might need the message for in future to determine how you will be sending the message across. I hope that helps. So moving on to communication styles. Let me see how much time we have left. I'm always taking so much time. Moving on to communication styles. One is passive communication. And this is characterized by just wanting to avoid conflict and, any direct, I don't want trouble, all those I don't want trouble kind of people. And for some of us as skilled professionals, you might find yourself in this situation because I'm new here, I don't want trouble. You really have to be careful with that because, again, even if that's the only thing you take away from this webinar, that Canada is an egalitarian society and you're expected to self-advocate. So you cannot afford to say that you don't want trouble. If you're doing that, then you might be limiting your opportunities. So these are people who typically avoid conflict and, they don't want to directly express their opinions. They're saying, I don't know, or maybe. So these are people who would hardly say, oh, I don't like that. They could say, they could be saying something like, oh, that's not a very okay idea. They'll be rephrasing it and massaging it, all sorts of things. So what I've done with these slides is to show you the typical response of each style of communication to a particular situation. So in a situation where someone with a passive style of communication has been invited to maybe a meeting on a Saturday morning, it's not during their work, it's just very inconvenient. So this person would likely be saying, sure, I'll be there if that's what works for everyone, even though that they don't want it, even though it is within their right to say, no, I'm not available for that meeting. They will likely say, oh, I'll go because I don't want trouble, I don't want conflict. The problem is the more you do that, the more you would be internally angry. And the more it will show up in your body language. Your words will be perfect, but your body language will be horrible. And you're wondering why that promotion is not coming to you. So very important to be mindful of this. The next style is the aggressive communication. In my culture also, we talk about something like, okay, I don't think it's raining anymore. It's not raining anymore. Like a couple of years ago, a phrase was raining, bass booze, meaning somebody gives it to you hard, you give it back to them hard. Like, I don't care. Some people say, I don't have time. I don't care. I'm this way. That's who I am. That's who I am. Okay. So this is characterized by expressing thoughts and feelings in a forceful and demanding way, often disregarding others' perspectives. And I'd like you to note that there's a thin line between being aggressive and being assertive. There's a thin line between both. And that's also one of the things we'll talk about at the workshop on Saturday, where you need to be able to draw that line so you don't cross the line from being assertive into being aggressive. So, and this kind of person, the typical response would probably be, that's really unreasonable. Why should I attend a meeting outside of work hours if they ask them to come for a meeting? This person might be raising their voice, they might be banging the table, they might be slamming the door, that's aggressive. The other thing you have to note that what was considered assertive within your home country's cultural context might actually be seen as aggressive within the Canadian context. Remember, it's a nice society. So even some words without raising your voice can be interpreted as aggressive. Meanwhile, for many of us, even raising our voices was not really considered as aggressive in our home countries. So these are nuances that we really have to be aware of. Moving on to the passive-aggressive style of communication. So these are people that they will typically hide their true feelings behind subtle hints. They will do indirect actions. They will not really address a concern openly. So they are angry or they are not happy with the situation, but they would never ever voice it. But you'll be feeling that aggression. You'll be feeling that their actions towards you will be negative. And in many times, not overtly negative. It's just something hidden, when every other person is watching, they're okay. When it's just you and them, or, some people are like that. And some of them can even go to the point of gaslighting you, and you're beginning to doubt yourself. So in a typical, the same situation, if this person is asked to come for a meeting, that's not convenient. Excuse me. They'll say, okay. They'll say, okay, that they will come. This is even better if they arrive late or they participate with minimum. Some of them, they won't even show up. They'll say, okay, they'll be there, but they won't show up. So that's something you really have to, pay attention to. Another thing is, so the last one here is assertive communication. And this is where we all really need to strive to be. That's the truth. But again, you may have been assertive in your home country, but now you're being considered as aggressive. And that's something you have to recognize so that you can ensure that it doesn't get in the way of your growth within the Canadian workplace. So this involves expressing your needs and opinions clearly and respectfully. And you're balancing respect for yourself with respect for others. You recognize that you're not Lord or king or queen over anyone. We all have equal rights. You deserve your own respect, but so does, another person deserves their own respect. So for example, if this person is asked to come for a meeting at an inconvenient time, they could be saying things like, I'll be happy to attend the meeting, but outside of work hours is challenging. Can we look at alternatives? So they have clearly communicated that they would love to be there. It's for work. We all want to get the work done, don't we? But outside of work hours, it just really doesn't work for me. And then they're offering alternatives. So this is an example of a sandwich method of communication, which we would explore deeply at the workshop on Saturday. So moving on. I would like you to spend some time, maybe at the end of the workshop, or let me see how much time we have. Yeah, you can even spend some time now, maybe like 1 minute. So think about, at the end of the webinar, sorry, or now, whatever works for you. So think about what really is your style of communication. And I know that I wasn't talking favorably about some of those styles of communication, but the truth is we're all human beings. And you can actually, your default style can be any of those styles. What is really important is for you to recognize your style and commit to taking yourself on that journey towards assertive communication. And I usually tell people, it's not because of anybody, it's because of you. By all means, be selfish. It's because of you, for your own growth. So think about it. How do I show up? How do I respond? What's my default? Let me tell you the truth. Let me just be honest. My default is aggressive communication. That's my default. I'm not I don't like trouble kind of person. I usually say I don't look for trouble, but I don't run away from trouble. But I discovered a very long time ago that I also don't want to go around, disrespecting people, and I realized that the way I was showing up was coming across as being disrespectful. It was not coming across, it was actually disrespectful. So I had to do the work of pushing myself from aggressive to assertive. And anybody can do that. That can be learned. What I don't want to hear from anybody is, that's who I am. Just take me as I am, please. Don't say that. I beg you. Don't even say that. We know that's who you are. I was on Instagram this morning and I was watching a video. I stumbled on a video where somebody was saying, oh, you're worthy just the way you are. Nobody's saying you're not perfect. But if your default is aggressive communication, you are worthy. You remain worthy. You will always be worthy. Faults, mistakes, and all. You will never, ever be unworthy. But is there work to be done? Yes. And we have to address that. And because you're worthy, you have to be willing to put in that work towards becoming a better version of yourself. So you don't have to type your style in the chat box. Just acknowledge it and ask yourself, if it's not assertive, the assertive style, ask yourself. And I hope we'll all be really honest with ourselves. If it's not the assertive style, ask yourself, how can I ensure that I take myself on that journey of becoming an assertive communicator for the good of my career, for the future of for my future, So let's move on for the purpose of time. So why is effective communication important? I'm going to rush through this. It's very important because it helps you to build cultural gaps. And I've spoken about how, language can even be a barrier. And it's not about your capacity to speak good English. It's how you use the English. Also knowing that you're showing up as somebody, we are the sum total of all the experiences we have had growing up. So culture, environmental observations of our parents or caregivers, teachers, the media, just so many different things at play. And if you do not build your effective communication skills and you're communicating, you're constantly operating in a diverse environment. Remember, for many of us who were previously in a place where our culture was the dominant culture in that space. So if you say something that's wrong, maybe many people would think, oh, she doesn't mean it or he doesn't mean it. Don't worry, it will be fine. People would understand, but here you don't have that benefit of doubt. It's a diverse environment. People can just take what you're saying at face value and think, oh, you're the most horrible person. So you really want to be making that effort to communicate effectively so you can build cultural gaps. If you don't build those gaps, you cannot form wonderful relationships. If you don't form those relationships, it's going to be difficult for you to grow in your career. The next thing is that it builds credibility and trust. Think of the scenario of somebody not trusting you just because you're not maintaining eye contact. Meanwhile, you're a trustworthy person. So if you don't work on that, you will constantly be showing up as somebody who is not trustworthy. Tell me, is that not a great disservice to you? So you really have to do the work of, building your effective communication skills. Another thing is that it enhances team collaboration. Again, diverse work environments. If you're able to build those cultural gaps, then you would be able to work better with your team members. Right. And again, I have said it, you're not going to become, an assertive communicator or an effective communicator right off the bat. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. But when you start the work, when you begin to recognize your blind spots, you'll be able to offer clarification. You'll be able to seek clarification. You'll be able to, provide more context. You'll be able to put in more work to ensure that your messages are creating the exact meaning that you want them to create. So it also increases, and this is very important. Some people have said, I put in a lot of work, I'm doing this. Without me, the team cannot function. Maybe that's why you're not growing, because without you, the team cannot function. Are you prioritizing visibility? My amazing coach would say, Steve Harris, would say, what if your business is solely dependent on referrals, then you're wrong. What if your clients decide to keep you as their best kept secret? So what if your manager decides to keep you as their best kept secret because they can't afford to lose you? So if you're able to build effective communication skills, you'll be able to find ways to communicate your value without making your manager look bad, without making it look like, oh, your team is horrible, making yourself look the way you should be showing up, like the way you should look, in a way that would make you, eligible for growth and leadership. This is why you need to build your communication skills. Remember how I said, when I was talking about communication channels and I was talking about written communication, spreadsheets was one of the examples. When I'm teaching leaders, somebody saying, I'm not growing, or they're not approving my report. Well, maybe you're communicating emotionally alone. Are you using data? Are you using numbers? Are you using one of the things? So when I was going to deliver my first workshop in Canada, I was extremely scared. I didn't even know how to do it. And then I realized that Canada is a system that prioritizes stats. So if you're sharing only emotional information, people will be like, oh, they will feel it, but they will not respect you. Those are things that you need to understand. And that data that you're providing, it has to be from a source that they value. not from your own sources. So you have to identify which sources do they value. So what I'm trying to say here is, if you want to build recognition and visibility, you really have to learn how to communicate, particularly the value you bring to the table. So moving on now, how do you build your communication muscles? How do you flex those? And I know we've talked about a number of things already. We've talked about, believe it or not, I didn't use the word self-awareness, but I'm sure you've heard me use the word empathy, which is a component of self-awareness. You've heard me say reflection, which I always preach. Like, there's nobody in this world who should not be doing self-reflections. So one of the ways to build self-awareness is to self-reflect. So you really want to understand yourself. How do you, what are your emotions? What are your triggers? How do you respond to other people? And what impact does your own communication and emotions and the way you're showing up, what impact does it have on other people? And you really have to be honest with yourself. So if you look at this image now, it's talking about how you can be an angel, you can be just a regular person, and you can also be the devil. All of us have different elements in us, right? You really have to be honest enough with yourself to have a clear picture of who you are, so that all of those weaknesses, they are not showing up in places where you don't want them to show up. At least if you know your weaknesses, you'll be able to manage them in a way that they are not showing up unconsciously. So you need to build self-awareness. So you want to reflect on your communication style, its strengths and areas for improvement, just like I said. You want to be listening actively. Like, this is very important. So communication is not just about you talking. Remember how I said it's also from the perspective of you being a receiver, and you are now decoding the information. That process of decoding happens through active listening. You will not be able to decode appropriately if you're not listening actively. And active listening is not just listening to the words, it's also watching for the non-verbal cues. It's listening to what is not being said, which is a skill you need to have in this Canada. Like, it's not even a joke. There's so many things that will not be said. In fact, most of the things you need to hear will not be said. So you really have to be watching for what is not being said. I will dive a bit deeper into this in the workshop too. So adaptability. I want to say here that you're flexing your communication style, you're trying to suit it to diverse audiences and contexts. Believe it or not, this is not, even though I'm not speaking Canadian English, but this is not how I speak English on a normal day when I'm talking to my children. I'm a Nigerian woman. I'm Nigerian Canadian. I always tell people, I'm not just Canadian, and I'm Nigerian first. That's who I am. That's the core of who I am, right? So the way I talk is different, but I recognize that people who would watch this webinar might be people from different parts of the world, and I don't usually say parts. I say parts. I don't say car, I say car when I'm talking, because that's the Niger way. So I'm trying to say, in terms of even words, you really want to be ensuring that you're doing your best to communicate in a way that's clear and that people can understand and hear you. And that you're, again, paying attention to your body language, so that you're, just think of that example that I gave. Think of the example of the eye contact, so that you're showing up in a way that they can understand. I'm not saying that you should be assimilated. I'm saying adapt. It's a form of empathy. You really also would not enjoy communicating with people that you don't understand. You really wouldn't like that. So very important for you to, make that effort to adapt your style of communication to the audiences that you are communicating with. Choose clarity and conciseness over volume. Very important. It's not in the number of words you're using. It's not if you're from my cultural context, we like big English, like big. But don't be a dumb professor. I don't know if you've heard of the dumb professor theory, where they're saying all of the big grammar, nobody understands. That's not going to help, and leadership is influence. So if you really want to influence people, you have to communicate with them in a way that they would understand you and use the information you're offering them to achieve the goals you want them to achieve. So be clear. Avoid jargons. And if you have watched any of our webinars in the past, like the resume webinar, I talk about this a lot, where I'm saying use the language that's prevalent within the community, within the industry, within the organization, so that you can be understood, right? And you have to constantly practice. See, we're all work in progress. Nobody is an island of knowledge. I find myself sleeping many times, like I'm sleeping off, I'm falling off, and I have to catch myself and come back and use, language that's proper, or I'm watching my body language. I'm just trying, you will constantly, the moment you stop working, the moment you stop recognizing that you're work in progress, that's the moment you stop growing and you start slipping off again. You really don't want to be slipping off. Remember what we're trying to do here. We're trying to not just survive. We need to thrive. So you have to constantly practice. And it's even wonderful because it's personal development. So you need to have a budget for your own personal development. And I don't mean monetary budget alone. I'm not talking about financial budgets. I'm also talking about budget some time, book some time for you to invest in your personal growth. You're here today or you're watching this video, you're not paying for it. It's, at no cost, but how much do you get paid per hour? So if you think about that, it's actually time, because you could be spending this time working. So it's time you're spending in your own personal development, and I applaud you for that. So constantly practice. Know that you're a work in progress, and you really have to continue to put in that work. So now that you have all of these insights, now that you have all of this, learning is nothing without action. That's just it. Think about the fact that think about how much you would have earned in the time that you have spent here if you were working. So don't waste that money. Don't waste that time, the time you have spent here. Try to put these things into action. That reflection, that personal reflection, try to do it. Very important. So that you're able to identify your blind spots, ask for feedback, begin to record yourself, see how you're showing up, see how you're sounding, record your voice, do an introduction of yourself and record it. You just might find out that when I found out that I was saying seven, meaning seven. So in my culture also, I think there's something about our tongue that causes us to not say seven, we say seven. It was from recording that I realized I was saying seven. So if I wasn't recording myself, I'll continue to say seven. Nobody will be able to tell me, Ola, you're saying seven, not seven. So if you don't record yourself, you would not know, right? That's what I'm trying to say. Remember, we are all work in progress. We are all work in progress. And that brings us to the end of the webinar today. Thank you for being here with us today. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat box. Your questions won't show up on YouTube, don't worry. Please type them in the chat box and I'll be very happy to answer them. Also, but while you're typing your questions or you're thinking of your questions, I would like to share some information about our work at the Successful Newcomer. Our vision is a diverse and supportive community where newcomers settle, effectively thrive, and positively contribute to the community and the economy. You cannot thrive and contribute to the economy if you don't invest in personal development and you don't action your learning. So please, let our work show. Also, our mission is, to empower newcomers of Black, African, and Caribbean descent to settle and thrive in Canada through tailored learning opportunities and by leveraging digital media, just like we're doing today. Our valuable offerings for you are the Rise and Strong video series, completely free at no cost to you. Just go to our YouTube channel. If you're not following us already on YouTube, if you're not subscribed to our channel on YouTube, please subscribe right now. Go watch, load up on inspiration, information, compassion. There's so much information. We've had 17 conversations so far, and you would be blessed by watching those real life experiences, right? That can be very helpful for even information about our community, the things that you need, some of the things you can leverage, you would find in the Rise and Strong video series. So I'm not going to show that because we don't have the time, but you will find that on our YouTube page. I think we do have the time.
5 years ago, I decided to immigrate to Canada with my family.
Sorry, I said I think we do have the time. I just checked my time. We do have the time. So please let's watch the trailer for season 2. The one we watched at the beginning was the trailer for season 1, but this is the trailer for season 2.
I'm an international student coming in 2022.
I moved to Canada in 2019.
I got to Canada in 2006.
I came to Canada in 2019.
I came in as a student.
My immigrant journey actually started in 2019.
I moved into Canada in 2015.
I arrived in 2023.
We came in 2017.
Nothing prepared me for the Canadian experience.
One of the main challenges for me has been finding communities that understand and appreciate you for who you are.
My journey coming to Canada, of course, it didn't pick from where I was.
The systems were different.
It's totally different from some of the things I see in the internet.
Transitioning from back home wasn't an easy journey.
I quickly learned that for a specific job, you need to have a specific resume.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy experience.
If I'm coming back to Canada, I have to prepare very well before I come.
I had to network, even though that's not a natural thing for me.
So think about it, even from the trailer, you can see that there's lots and lots of value in all of those conversations. So again, visit our YouTube page, The Successful Newcomer, and load up on inspiration and information. Okay, let's move on. Another way that we offer value is through webinars like this. We have, and all of the webinars are right now, they're going down very soon, but right now they're still on our YouTube page. We have a resume webinar about how to, to write your resume in a way that helps you stand out in the Canadian job market. We have an interview webinar called Interview Like a Pro. And then we, what's this? Okay, there's someone, did I allow someone to, someone, let me clear that off. I'll clear that, don't worry. I think that was a mistake. That's not mine, I think. I'm not sure, we'll just move on. I think this is a mistake that we can ignore, just ignore the lines on the screen. So the second webinar is on interviewing like a pro in Canada so that you can show up and nail that job. And the last webinar was on crafting your elevator pitch so that you can be equipped with the information you need to be able to convert any interaction, even the smallest interactions, into life-changing opportunities. Just think of if you find yourself in an elevator with like someone you've always wanted to meet and that someone who can offer you opportunities, what are you going to say about yourself that will get them to ask for more information about you? That'll get them to say, oh, let's meet up for coffee. Think of that, think of it that way. And then today we're talking about communication, foundations for effective Canadian workplace communication. So all of these webinars you will find on our YouTube page. And moving on, we have the Canadian Resume Writing Toolkit. If you're really struggling with your resume, or you know anyone who is struggling with their resume, this is a toolkit you need. It's a typical it's a real hand-holding experience where you don't even need a coach or anyone, and it's not one video. There are 29 videos, and it meets you wherever you are. So you can select exactly what you need. If you already know about the basics of Canadian resume writing, 2 pages, formatting, all of those things, fantastic. Go. If all you need to know is how to write your achievements on your resume, you have that. If all you need to know is how to tailor your resume, you have that. If all you need to know is what's it called now? How to write your professional experience, you have that. If it's about how to write your professional summary, you have that. There's so many pieces of value in this toolkit. You really do need it. And today, I'm going to post the link in the chat box. You can actually get it for $10 off if I through the link I'm going to post in the chat box. If you know anybody who needs it, please feel free to share with them. I'm going to share this video with you.
Think about it this way. Your job search is like a marketing campaign, and your resume is your core marketing tool, and you are the product. The primary goal is to present your qualification clearly and concisely. The resume is meant to secure an interview for you. Your resume should present a snapshot of your skills and experience and qualification in such a compelling way that whoever is reviewing your resume really cannot wait to be talking to you.
Okay, so and great feedback we got from someone a couple of days ago who had created their resume based on all of the info. They downloaded one of the templates, used all of the information, they created their resume, and they just got an interview from one of the top organizations in Canada. This is someone who had been trying to get interviews for a while now. So it actually does work. It does work. So moving on, we have a workshop coming up on Saturday called Effective Workplace Communication. I'm just wondering where this is coming from. I apologize for that. I have no idea. And I don't want to take too much of time trying to figure out how to take that out. So Effective Workplace Communication workshop for immigrant professionals, that's coming up this Saturday, November 9th from 5:30 to 8:30. It's happening online. And in that workshop, you gain a solid understanding, would explore your communication style more, and you will learn how to adjust it for different workplace interactions. You gain techniques for using empathic communication so that you can build stronger relationships and foster a positive work environment. You'll be able to express your ideas. You learn how to express your ideas with confidence, and we'll have lots and lots of practice sessions, practice activities, role plays and scenarios, which is why it's great that you're here. Whoever is gonna, be at the workshop has to watch this webinar first. So we don't have to talk about all of these things. We can, dive a bit more into the real role plays and the activities that you can actually use as you go along with your work. We hope to see you there. I'm gonna put the link to register in the chat box also. This is the date. The investment is $49, and it's November 9, 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. And we always have limited spaces because we want to have those role plays and activities. So I'll type the link in the chat box, don't worry. So does anybody have any questions? I can't see any question in the chat box, and we have just 3 minutes more. Any questions? Okay, so while you're thinking of your questions, I would say thank you so much for being here. We really do appreciate your presence. We hope you have had some value. If you can type some of your feedback in the chat box, it would be lovely to hear from you, what you thought of the session, so that we can constantly improve our work and continue to bring you value. If there's also a topic area you want us to explore, anything related to something that can help you thrive in the Canadian workplace, then we would be happy to entertain that. So let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about, or like a pain point that you want us to address. We would love to bring you more value by talking about things that are really important to you. So you're asking for the YouTube link. It's here now. You can just click on it to access our YouTube channel. Okay, no, there's no need to be sorry. I didn't post it before. I just posted it now. So I posted it after you spoke. So thank you for asking about it. Okay, so we have come to the end of the session. I'm going to leave the room open for a bit so that you can give us your feedback. We look forward to reading your feedback regarding what you thought of the session and any topics you'd like us to explore. That's very important. Any topics you'd like us to explore. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for being here today. We wish you an amazing, today's Thursday, so we wish you an amazing rest of the week. Take care of yourselves and keep thriving. Bye.